Welcome back, Toxic Garage Customs. I'm Todd. Thanks for joining me. So on this episode, I do the totally illogical and I get this thing running. That's it. Get it running. So I put fuel pipe in it. I put some rubber hoses, some of the rubber hoses, and I fiddle around. I use my Fire in the Hole 3000 remote starting device that I've made, which I'll give you a little bit of a run through. Tip some fuel down the carby, squirt some stuff around, don't catch fire, and get it running. So by the end of this episode, you'll hear this thing running. Actually sounds pretty good. So watch. Remember, at the end, press that subscribe button. I don't care if you don't like it. I don't care if you don't share it. Don't even care if you don't comment. But I'd love if you did. But subscribe if you haven't, because that does me a big favour. So, cut, weld, grind and drive. Enjoy the video. Here's today's handy trade tip. If you're missing a vacuum fitting, but you've got lots of other things hanging around, well, use one of those. Piece of plastic to keep dust out of the carby, that works. But if you're missing a vacuum fitting, use a silicone tube nozzle. It'll work every time. Multi-sized. Trade tips brought to you by Toxic Garage Customs. So we're playing around just trying to get some power to this thing at the moment. So as I said, I've seen this thing run before. I've not disconnected any of the wiring or anything. It was just sort of hot wired. So I've just got the battery sitting there. It's not as precarious as it looks. It's actually sitting on a block of timber on the upper control arm. I don't think there's anything sitting on the headers or anything like that, so I think we're pretty good there. And I've just got this thing, well, there's a jumble of wires here. It's not as complicated as it looks. I've got this professional looking device here that I call Fire in the Hole 3000, brought to you by Toxic Garage Customs. Check it out on the on our store. So all it is basically you pull this button here up. I haven't got this connected at the moment. Pull this button here up and it allows power to go through, and then you press this and it's basically just like an ignition switch. So that's turning the power on. Like on your ignition switch, you turn it on and you can have power lights on your dash, and then you turn at that final click. That's the final click, and it sends power to the starter motor. So this just goes, it's got this fat wire over to the positive. And again, this isn't my wiring, so yeah, normally your earth lead would be black. But anyway, so got power going to the power terminal on the battery, positive terminal on the battery. And then it's got this red wire here. And it just goes down to the solenoid on the starter motor. So theoretically, if I joined this to the solenoid, and obviously I've got to have the battery terminals connected as well. If I did that, pull this up, push that button, then it should be the same as sending power to the starter motor, making it start, or making it wind over. But then I also have this separate wire, this one here, that I can plug into the coil. So again, once this is turned on, then it will send power to the coil. So as soon as I flick that up, it'll start sending power to the coil, much the same as your car. If you leave your ignition turned on, you can burn your coil out. So lift this up, sends power to the coil, so the coil's going, yep, I'm ready, I've got power here. Wind me over, so you push that button, sends power down to the starter motor winds over, engine starts, power is being sent to the coil, so sparks being created, and theoretically, as long as everything else, fuel and air and all that sort of stuff, timing is good, then this thing should start. In the first place, all I really want to do is get it winding over. So I haven't connected the coil up yet, this wire here, haven't connected it up. Having said that, the coil may be connected within the loom, so I need to just be cautious of that. And just to show that, I'm just going to put it on a tripod for a second. If you're trying to do any electrical work or fault finding, then a multimeter like this is really handy. It can be used to measure volts, it can be used to measure amps, and it can be used to measure ohms. Now, if all of that sounds a little bit confusing to you, don't be too fussed about it. I'm not an electrician, but it tells me some simple things. So if I want to check out whether I've got, how many volts I've got, if I flip this around to 20 volts, this is a 12 volt battery, and I put the negative on the negative terminal and the positive on the positive terminal, at the moment, for some reason the negative on the positive. If I put the negative on the negative terminal and the positive on the positive terminal, nothing happens because I got it on the wrong side. It will tell me that there's 12.63 volts, 63 volts. Now a fully charged 12 volt battery, ironically, will have close to 14 volts. I think it's about 13.7 volts or something. So anything less than that is actually flat. Anything less than about this is flat. So I've just got the multimeter set onto the voltage setting, onto the 20 up to 20 volts. So meaning that it will read the range of 0 up to 20 volts. And this is a 12 volt battery. Haven't got anything connected at the moment, so it's reading 0. So I'm simply going to push this into the positive wire, the one that goes to the relay, the solenoid I should say, for the starter motor. And I'm going to turn my ignition on, so nothing should happen. So it's pulling the button up. Just got the button pulled up, nothing happens. But when I push the go button, the ignition button, you can see that 12.63 volts is being fed. It's being fed from the positive terminal of the battery through the wire into a switch. When the switch was turned off, no power could go through. But then that switch is wired into the go button. So again, push that and it's sending power to my solenoid if it was actually connected. So that would crank it over. I'll turn my ignition off, nothing's going to happen. Now for the coil, I've got it wired up in such a way so that as soon as I turn on the ignition, the power will come through. So if I pull the button up, there's power there straight away, exactly like your car would do. I don't need to push the go button because I'm not trying to make it start. I've just got power going to the coil. So have both connected, have this connected to the coil, this one connected to the coil, this one connected to the starter motor, turn the ignition on with the button, with the switch, got power going to the coil, push the button, it sends power to the solenoid, it'll wind the engine over. And that's the way it works. I can only get these readings at the moment because I've actually got the battery, the earth lead on my multimeter connected as well, because essentially I'm creating a circuit from the battery through the switch and back to the battery again. And that's all it is. It's not overly complicated. Now you don't need something like this. I just have it because it just means I can, when I'm trying to start something, I can plug this in, plug that in, and away I go. You can actually just hot wire it with some wires. As far as the ohm meter goes, it's another good thing. You can use all of these things. Again, I'm not an electrician, but an ohm meter, what it does, it'll tell you basically whether there is a circuit between two things. So the simplest way of showing that, I've got the negative and the positive, touch them together, you can hear a bipping. I've got it turned onto the bipping thing. You can also put it to actually see how much resistance is there. Now if that means something to you, fantastic. If it doesn't, if you just want to know if two things are connected, then you can do that. So what it's saying is that if I touch this on the radiator, which I'll just turn the camera, the radiator, which is metallic, it's alloy, touch it there, what it's saying is that the radiator can conduct electricity. If I put it on a rubber hose, it doesn't work because rubber doesn't conduct electricity. Now let's see, if my grill, I'm touching the grill here at the moment, you can't see that, it's off camera. If the grill has a good circuit, so in other words, good clean threads in bolts and things going to the radiator, then it should also tell me that it's earthed. Okay, so that means that one is connected to the other. So theoretically, I have a circuit going between those parts. So the engine, I don't think I've got an earth strapped to the body yet. So if I touch the engine, I don't think it's going to work because I haven't actually connected the body to the engine in any way yet. So let's see. Not going to work. But if I actually had a thick wire going from the engine somewhere onto the body, then everything would be a continuous circuit. So currently the engine is not connected or earthed to the body, so that's important to have, by the way. So if I touch the battery in some point and touch the engine, nothing going on. So people often have situations where wires are connected and things aren't working, and it's quite often a dirty earth. You hear people say, I think you've got a dirty earth. So I'm just going to connect one wire here, and again, if I touch rubber, it's not going to work. That's like having a dirty earth because it's not conducting electricity. If I touch something down here, so I'm touching the alternator bracket and it's not working, but if I scratch it, I just scratched through some of the grease and grime that was on there, then I now have a circuit. So if you've got a dirty earth, or a dirty connection at all, but often it's a dirty earth, then the electricity can't flow. It's got to go in a circuit. So when you're being told, oh, okay, something's not working, check your earth, check you've got a dirty earth, that's what people are talking about. So I'm going to touch the earth lead that goes from the battery to the alternator, and the bolt's got some rust on it. If I touch the terminal, it's actually okay. So I'm actually going to take that earth strap off and clean those terminals up, just to make sure I've got a good earth before I try and do anything here and frustrate myself and find out why it's not working. So let's do that. So before I take the earth strap off, I'll show you what I mean. If I have this lead here, which is behind the multimeter, you can't quite see it, but it's going to the earth terminal, the negative terminal on the battery. So it's going to the negative terminal on the battery, that one over there. And yeah, don't be concerned the fact that it's red. I know it's a bit confusing. And then it comes down behind here, and you can see it moving at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to go down to the bottom of the screen. So I've got one end of the multimeter on the ohm meter setting connected to that terminal, so that lead. And really what should happen is, because it's going and it's running down to the body, the motor, I should be able to touch any part of the motor and get a bip. But I'm not getting anything. If I touch the bolt that's holding it in, I'm not getting anything. If I just touch the actual terminal, I'm getting something. So what it's telling me is there's a bad earth. So when it's touching there, it's all good, but it's not earthing to the engine. So what I'm going to do is simply take that bolt out, and then I'm going to I'm going to take that bolt out, and then I'm simply going to clean up the contact between the bolt and the terminal. Now, when things sit around, particularly alloy, they corrode, but the alloy gets a fluffy corrosion on it. Wires themselves can look good on the outside, but have fractures on the inside and just not work fully. So I'm simply taking this bolt out, which holds the bracket on for the alternator, and have no idea whether that's the correct earth position for a Holden, but it doesn't matter terribly as long as it's an earth, it's an earth. So taking that bolt out. So a couple of things it could be the back of this terminal, or the front of the terminal is not clean enough. Could be that the bolt wasn't clean into its threads, or where it's touching onto the frame, onto the mount, or it could just be this point here. So I'll clean them all. So this star washer here, that actually is specifically to give a good earth contact. So I suspect that is the earthing point. They give a good ground. Okay, so off camera, I've just given both the front and the back of this a clean. I actually end up using a wire brush, and this bolt, I put it on the wire wheel on my bench grinder, clean the threads and both sides of the washers and so on, just to make it nice and clean metal. And I cleaned the surface down here, just use some emery paper or coarse sandpaper for that. So I'm just going to bolt all this back together now. Now let's just see. Firstly, this should bip. Okay, that bips. Let's just sit that there and see what happens. That's bipping. Okay. Pop it into here. Let's just sit it there without even doing it up. Not bipping. Okay. So maybe it's not going to bip until we do it up. I'm actually going to move this so that the star washer is between the earth and the metal. Nip it up until it snaps and then turn it back quarter turn. Okay. Touch that, it's good. Touch the bracket, it's good. What happens if I touch the thermostat housing on the engine? Ah, good. Look, what happens if I touch the carburetor? Bit dodgy because it's not clean. But what about this rusty bit of metal just here? Okay, not good. Scratch through it. Still not good. That's not a good earth. That bracket there is not a good earth. That's fine. So dirty surfaces. Not a good earth. But what we have is that I can touch this bolt and it's a good earth. So I have continuity from my engine through to over here. So I'll connect my wire to my starter solenoid and I think it should be okay as long as the terminal on the starter solenoid's clean. So let's have a look. Okay, got the budgies in the background. So we've got, haven't got that connected to the coil, but as I said, I'm not sure the coil may be connected throughout the rest of the wiring. We'll see. I'm pretty sure I've got this in park. The inhibitor switch isn't connected, so if it's not in park, it could still try and kick forward. Got the power ready to go, got it to the solenoid, so I pull my button up, get a little drum roll, stand out of the way. Okay, we got power to the starter motor. Winding over. Got no smoke coming out of anywhere yet. Got to check nothing magical's happening anywhere. Okay. I have my coil wire from here to the positive terminal on my coil, which, believe me, it's on the positive coil of the terminal, positive terminal of the coil. I've got one of the plugs pulled out and I've just got it connected onto the lead there because I just want to see if I've got any spark. So let's see. Hopefully we'll be able to see. If you don't blink, there's spark there. So we've got spark. Don't know if the timing's any good, but this thing was running last time it was running. That's a good statement. So fuel, spark, should be able to get this thing kicking over at least. So let's chuck some fuel in and see what happens. Fire in the hole. Just kicking over, but here a little bit of arcing of something. This terminal. Okay, so if you want to get your mum or your wife to love you more, once again, get some of her stainless steel bowls from the kitchen to put a bit of fuel into. Spread it all around so that you catch fire on your engine bay. Put it up there. You saw it here first. First engine start, that motor in that international truck. If you heard my wife in the background then, she was pretty happy about it. And it's her bowl. Let's see if we can get it to happen again. Oh, go away, you noisy bird. Okay, white cockatoos. So what we have at the moment is, I don't know if any fuel is coming from the fuel tank. I suspect it's not. No, fuel filter's empty. So might have to prime the lines up there by tipping some fuel down them to try and get rid of the airlock, I guess, that's in the fuel pipes. I have got some fuel in the tank and I think it should be enough to have covered the pickup. So we'll prime the lines and we'll see if we can actually get it to run off its own fuel tank rather than off me tipping things out of a baking dish into the carburetor. So good moment. You saw it here first and second as well. So when I disconnected the fuel filter from the hose, there was a lot of pressure there and fuel actually squirted out. So I'm wondering whether fuel is actually making its way up to the fuel filter or up to this hose here. Can you see? Yep, up to this hose here that goes to the carby. I think there's a little strainer filter in there. I'm suspecting something along there is blocked because there was a lot of pressure. So I'm just going to wind this over and I'm going to MacGyver this. And if you don't know who MacGyver is, Google it because you're letting yourself down. And I'm just going to stick this in here and wind it over and just see if any fuel comes out. Yep, straight away, fuel's coming out. So what that's telling me is that fuel's coming up from my fuel tank through the new pipe that I put in. I'll check if it leaks in a little while. Into the fuel pump, it's pumping up, so it tells me the fuel pump's working as well. So it's coming to here. So somewhere between my filter and the carby, I think it's blocked. So let's have a look. As I said, that is a second-hand filter. It was what I thought was the best out of two. I didn't want to run no filter. In hindsight, I probably could because it's a new tank and new lines, so theoretically I don't really need a filter straight off. I'm going to see if that's blocked. Let's have a look. Word of advice, blow, don't suck. And also make sure the filter's on the right way, the flow is the right direction. Well, that's not blocked, that's okay. Not a lot of stuff came out. So I'm going to check that little barb fitting on the carby there. I'm pretty sure, I haven't pulled one of those apart before, but I'm pretty sure that barb fitting, there'll be a little screen filter behind it. Just here. Let's have a look. Okay, so I was correct. I took that fitting out and there is a little filter in there, so let's have a look, see what that looks like. I'll tell you what, it's not horrible. There's junk in there, so it's good that I cleaned out. It's good that the filter's there. There's some rusty rubbish in there, but I don't think that'd be enough to block it. I'm just going to have a look in the base of the carby. I think I can see a bit of stuff in there as well, so probably would have been wise to give that a clean, but this filter, that's what it's for. So it could have just had a vacuum lock, air lock. That's actually just a little spring in the bottom of the carby. Must just push this back. So I've given that filter a clean. I just cleaned it with some brake cleaner because that's what I had. Doesn't really matter, petrol, carby clean, whatever. So that just goes in there. So the idea is the fuel comes in there, it can catch it in that filter, and then the filter is a serviceable, removable item. So let's pop it back in. So that's the stuff, that's the junk that was in that strainer filter. So any speck of that is enough to block up, one of your jets, whatever, any component in your carby. So a good thing to have. And that was with 2 fuel filters on the line, if you remember. So obviously there was a lot of junk in this when they were trying to run this prior. So hopefully the carby's not too junked up. If I need to rebuild it, clean it, whatever, I will. Just at this point in time, it'd be good just not to have to. But it started and it sort of was running, so I'm confident. So I've put the fuel filter back on and I've put the hose on. But what I'm going to do before I connect it up, I'm actually just going to prime it. So as in just push a bit of fuel through it by winding it over. Hopefully I don't cop loose in the face. Just to get the fuel filter full, just to rule that one out. So we can see the fuel going into the filter there, coming out now. Okay, so no drama there. No drama there. Okay, there's some crap coming out of that filter though. I'm wondering if I'm better without it. Might have had some dirty fuel in the fuel pump as well. Okay, there's definitely fuel coming out. The pump's working, so that's a good thing. It's got a sort of crusty colour to it, but I'm going to go with it because there can't be that much in there. What's in there has to all have been just from the fuel pump, because everything else has been off and on. Run this under the radiator hose. Try not to spill fuel absolutely everywhere. And like that. Lovely. Make sure it's not going to get caught on the fan or anything like that, which I've already done. Make sure it's not going to get tangled up in the belts, hit the fan, because you don't want it to hit the fan. Still got no coolant or water in this, and that's okay. I'm not going to run it for that long. It's just an initial startup. Okay. I'm pretty sure we've got a blockage in the carby because the fuel is coming through. Fuel filter's still full, pump's working, we know that. But when I give it some throttle, there's no fuel coming out. So I'm going to, in the first place, use this, which you may remember was a vacuum pipe fitting off an air cleaner a little while ago. Just going to fill up the float bowl and see if that makes any difference. I think she's full, based on the fact that, I don't know, maybe just overfilled the funnel. And maybe the float's stuck. I've given it a couple of taps. Blew a bit of air in there as well, and I did notice a little bit of water, just a couple of bits. It's quite obviously water coming out, so yeah, it could be a bit corroded. Maybe there's water, just a bubble of water can block a gallery, if that's the right term, for the fuel to flow through. So let's see. Okay, so she's well and truly flooded. Absolutely got fuel everywhere. Maybe that wasn't a float bowl, no, a fuel bowl. I don't know. Maybe she'll catch on fire. Okay, let's go. Let's see what happens. All good. I'm happy with that. I can work with that. That's a wrap. We got it running. Yes! So how cool is that? Got that throbbing 4.2 litres of Holden V8 goodness doing its thing. Okay, it's not really doing its thing smoothly or consistently, but it made noise. That was my goal, to make it make noise, make it run. As far as I'm concerned, that thing's running. So it just needs to be fine-tuned from there. So carby off, give it a clean, set the timing. Actually, don't think it needs much more than that. Obviously, I'll rip the plugs out and all that sort of stuff, but I'm actually convinced that that thing's not too bad. Now, I'm not going to get too excited about it because all that's going to be coming back out at some point in time. Motor will come out, gearbox will come out, cab will come back off, chassis will get painted, fuel lines off, all that. This is just cobbling it together, putting the screws where they need to go and putting the pipes where they need to go and making sure everything fits before stripping the whole thing apart and then finishing it off. Now that's quite a way down the track yet. I've still got a fair bit to do. Like some logical stuff. Maybe put the accelerator pedal in. Sort out some shift linkages. That'll be a bit of engineering behind that. Maybe get the brakes working. That'd be a good idea, wouldn't it? Now the brakes, that may seem back to front, because if it's all going to be pulled apart again, then all the fluid will come out and all the rest of it. But I actually want to drive the thing up the driveway and move it across and up the driveway and move it back across, so I can actually get to the passenger side of it. So while it was impulsive of me, and I got the motor running, because you need something that lifts you a bit every now and then. Fabricating, I like doing it. But you fabricate, you build something else, you fabricate something else. Okay, it's progress. To hear the motor, that's a sort of, okay, great. Todd, get some energy about you, move along to the next thing. Once I can actually drive it up and down the driveway, then that'll be another thing. So there's some stages in between to make that happen. But they're little wins, and those little wins keep you motivated. They keep me motivated. So the next things I'm going to be working on will be those things. Throttle pedal, shift linkages, sorting the brakes out somewhat. I might rebuild the master cylinder just so that it throws the fluid properly, because I can tell you at the moment, it's not doing that. So thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this one. If you want to know anything more about my Fire in the Hole 3000, let me know. I can actually do a short video on what it looks like inside. It's not complicated, but I haven't explained how it's wired up, so happy to do that. It's a cool little thing to have. Costs bugger all, a few bucks, a couple of switches, that sort of stuff. So let me know if you want that or anything else, then please let me know. Happy to make a video, happy to help. That's why I'm here, that's why I do it. So at the end of the day, if you can do one thing for me, subscribe. The other stuff, all good and well, but if you can subscribe, that really helps. I'm chasing 1,000 subscribers. At the moment, I've got maybe 170. So I've got a fair way to go. But the only way I can get there is if you, the viewers, subscribe. If you like my content, subscribe. You'll get a little bell when I get new stuff come up and stuff like that. And if you can share it with your friends, if you think they might like it, and ask them to subscribe, then that will help. I'm going to keep doing the videos anyway, but if I can get to 1,000 subscribers, it actually means something. So anyway, enough of my jibber jabber. I'll see you next time. I'm Todd.